An office worker who has lived his entire life oppressed by his boss and job is transported to a new world where the Dark King appoints him as a high-ranking commander in his army, believing that this simple office worker is the key to conquering the world. In a dark castle, the Dark King summons the high-ranking members of his demon army: Omandra, the infernal aggressor; Sylphid, the archmage of storms; Gnome, the mud bastion. Finally, he introduces the newest member, who will be a key part of his conquest: the foreign supervisor, Denosuke Uchimura. Uchimura was an ordinary office worker. He managed to land a job, and full of hope, gave it his all. However, as time passed, his efforts went unnoticed, unlike his colleagues who steadily climbed the corporate ladder. One day, he was informed that he would be transferred abroad as part of the company's expansion efforts. His colleagues thought it was a terrible idea since starting a new branch was an incredibly demanding task. Nevertheless, Uchimura accepted and went abroad. He quickly discovered that the project lacked both equipment and manpower. Uchimura tried to speak with his boss, but he was simply ordered to continue the work without any support. Uchimura pleaded with his colleagues to stay and help him, but it was futile. He worked tirelessly, day after day, to single-handedly establish the branch, and his efforts eventually paid off. Soon, everything started functioning as it should. Then, Uchimura received a call informing him that he would be transferred to another country. Exhausted, he went for a walk, wondering why he stayed at a job where he wasn't valued. At that moment, an elderly woman accidentally hit him with her scooter, sending the poor man flying. He woke up in a strange world, surrounded by intimidating figures. The Dark King welcomed him, revealing that he was the one who summoned him. The Dark King announced that Uchimura would be a high-ranking officer and the foreign supervisor of his demon army. Uchimura couldn't believe that a downtrodden office worker like him would be named a general in an army. The Dark King presented Uchimura's resume, which stated that after 5 years of service, his company sent him abroad, where he learned a new language, educated the locals, and successfully managed a new business. After reviewing this record, the Dark King was convinced Uchimura was worthy of joining his army. Uchimura was pleased that his achievements were finally being recognized, but he doubted whether leading an army was a good career move. The Dark King assured him that his position as a high-ranking officer came with many benefits. His salary and authority would be equivalent to that of a department manager. He could choose his subordinates, and he would have the office of his choice. However, if he refused, he would be sent back to his world, as the Dark King would not force him to work against his will. Uchimura was surprised to hear this, as he never expected the Dark King to respect workers' rights so much. Even so, Uchimura began to recall all the demeaning comments from his boss and co-workers. He told the Dark King that his boss didn't value him because he failed to meet their expectations, and that he was considered trash, unworthy of working for the Dark King. The Dark King exploded, telling him not to accept such nonsense. He explained that fools only value what they can see and are incapable of looking into the shadows. He declared that he had seen Uchimura's work, which is why he wanted him as a subordinate, because he believed in his potential. Uchimura was still doubtful, so the Dark King said that neither his boss nor his company determined his worth. Only the Dark King can do it. That was why he had summoned him, because he needed him. The Dark King then asked Uchimura to decide: work for a fool who would exploit him, or serve the Dark King and aim for the top. Uchimura finally made his decision, but before he could announce it, he was interrupted by Omandra, who objected to having such a weak human on the high command. Her fellow commanders agreed. The Dark King understood their concerns and proposed putting Uchimura to the test. Uchimura accepted, albeit fearfully, as he lacked any physical abilities. Before he could clarify this, Omandra eagerly challenged him to a fight, expecting that humans from other worlds possessed special powers. Excited to test him, she launched a lethal kick. Uchimura thought it was the end for him, but the Dark King intervened just in time, saving him. He scolded Omandra, pointing out that her greatest flaw was being ruled by her emotions, and revealed that Uchimura had fainted from the shock. The Dark King clarified that Uchimura was an ordinary human with no special powers or abilities. This only strengthened Omandra's opposition. Gnome added that the army was composed of monsters, and having a human in command could cause problems, especially for the human. However, he admitted that most problems were usually caused by demons. Omandra, being a demon, accused Gnome species, the demi-humans, of being the ones who always complicated matters. The Dark King acknowledged the many tensions within the army, which was precisely why he believed Uchimura could help. He wasn't looking for a powerful human, but rather one with ingenuity. Uchimura woke up, begging not to be attacked. The Dark King reassured him and proposed a test suitable for his level. The army was trying to negotiate with neighboring tribes. The most challenging negotiation was with the Minotaur tribe. Uchimura's test would be to strike a deal with them. He advises him to speak with Ulmandra, who has been handling the negotiations so far. Ulmandra leads him through the castle's hallways, insulting him as they go. Uchimura wonders if this could be considered workplace harassment, though he concedes she has a point. He knows that a mere office worker like him doesn't bring much to the table. He recalls the Dark King's words, how he told him not to listen to fools, and that he was summoned because he was needed. Uchimura had always wanted to work for a boss who genuinely valued him, and that motivated him to do his best to meet expectations. They arrive at a large chamber where meetings are held. Ulmandra warns him that the Minotaurs are very fierce. Despite his nerves, Uchimura is determined to do his best. However, when he sees the massive beast, he becomes terrified and starts doubting himself again. Ulmandra offers to help him a bit, but all she does is shout at the Minotaur, who keeps insisting she doesn't understand. Ulmandra explains that the negotiation started well at first, but when it came to discussing terms, Terius simply became agitated and began refusing everything. For days, Terius continued rejecting every proposal and even brought in large amounts of straw to scatter across the chamber. After bringing him up to speed, Ulmandra leaves Uchimura to handle the situation on his own. Feeling hopeless against such a beast, Uchimura walks away, disheartened. Then, he remembers something and finds himself transported in his mind to his favorite bar. He takes a drink, as he reflects on the situation and recalls facing something similar before, a negotiation with men who became highly agitated and said no to everything. After finishing his drink, he returns to reality, determined to close the deal. Ulmandra finds Uchimura bagging the straw Terius had scattered. He tells her he's ready to give the negotiation a try. Ulmandra scoffs, saying it's impossible because Terius's demands are as immense as he is, and he has no interest in reaching an agreement. Uchimura replies that it doesn't matter. Since the negotiations started well, the stalemate must have been caused by a misunderstanding. He explains that the only way to achieve a deal is through patience, perseverance, and building trust. He grabs a bag of straw and assures her he will succeed. Ulmandra notices that Uchimura now looks much more confident. The next day, Ulmandra enters the chamber to find it in chaos, with straw scattered everywhere. She assumes something went terribly wrong. When Uchimura arrives, she demands to know what happened and where Terius is. He calmly replies that Terius is with the Dark King, signing the pact. The Minotaur tribe will now be their allies. Ulmandra is stunned that Uchimura managed to seal the deal in a single night and asks him how he did it. He explains that Terius wasn't refusing to negotiate. In fact, it was the opposite. Terius liked the deal. Uchimura recounts a past negotiation abroad where his partners had said no 1,000 times. The more adjustments he made to convince them, the more agitated they became. He thought they would never agree, but in the end, the partners enthusiastically accepted the deal. Uchimura explains that in some cultures, passionate negotiations are considered a good thing. That was the misunderstanding. When Uchimura spoke with Terius, they were able to understand each other. He adds that in Terius's tribe, bringing straw into the chamber is a gesture of courtesy. Terius hadn't wanted to sleep on the bed they gave him, preferring the floor. Since they had removed all the straw, he'd been having terrible nights and was sleep deprived. Terius had been frustrated because he couldn't communicate his thoughts in a way Ulmandra understood, which is why he kept saying, "You don't understand." Ulmandra realizes she hadn't made enough effort to understand him, but Terius interrupts, admitting the misunderstanding was mutual. He hadn't realized his actions were considered rude in their culture, and he apologizes. They shake hands and settle the matter. Terius thanks Uchimura for everything he did. With that, the Dark King proves to Ulmandra that Uchimura has the talent to see what others cannot. The Dark King congratulates Uchimura for his outstanding work and welcomes him to the High Command, confident that no one will question his talent after the results of this test. He asks Uchimura to raise his arm and gives him a symbol of his new rank, a golden bracelet with a green gem. He tells Uchimura not to hold back and to work freely, doing whatever he believes is best. Uchimura thanks him and promises to do his best. Ulmandra raises her arm to show her own bracelet and asks him to do the same. They state their names and ranks in the army and clash their bracelets together. Ulmandra explains that this is how her clan welcomes new friends. She warns him not to get too cocky, as she still doesn't fully acknowledge him. The Dark King knows his army still has a long way to go, but he trusts that Uchimura is the piece they need to set the entire demon army in action. Uchimura is still adjusting to the idea of his new life. Just a few days ago, he was a simple office worker in a small country, and now he is a high-ranking member of the Dark Lord's demon army. He now has a large office, and is determined to give his all to meet the expectations of the Dark Lord, the only one who has ever recognized his worth. Now that Uchimura has accepted the job, he wants to follow proper etiquette, such as greeting all of his fellow high-ranking officers, even those he hasn't had a chance to speak to yet. He first goes to Sylphid's office, knocks on the door, and is greeted by a lovely girl who asks him who he is. Uchimura introduces himself as the new high-ranking officer and explains his intention to speak to Sylphid. The girl apologizes and informs him that Sylphid has been away for some time. She introduces herself as Sylphid's assistant, Belinda, and promises to notify her boss of his visit before slamming the door in his face. Uchimura accepts his failure for the day, but decides to keep trying. Just then, Ulmandra arrives to tell him that the Dark Lord has a new task for him. The Dark Lord assigns him to negotiate a merger with the Ogre tribe, as strengthening the demon army with demi-human tribes is critical. Ogres are one of the most important tribes. Ogres have military power similar to the demon army and lead neighboring races. Because of this, they refuse to join another army of equal strength. A merger could be very beneficial to both sides, but if something goes wrong, they would also be very dangerous enemies. In the human world, such a negotiation would be similar to a corporate merger. Uchimura knows that it is a challenging task, but the Dark Lord believes that he can carry it out. Knowing how dangerous the mission could be, Ulmandra offers to accompany him. Uchimura thanks her, and Ulmandra, trying to downplay her concern, admits that she worries too much if she doesn't go with him. She suggests that they rely on each other more as fellow high-ranking officers. Uchimura agrees and proposes to visit Gnome before embarking on their mission. Gnome is the leader of the demi-humans and could provide crucial information for negotiating with the ogres. Ulmandra refuses to see Gnome and instead goes to check out the carriage. Uchimura thinks it's a good idea to split up the tasks to speed up the process. He goes to the training ground, where Gnome is overseeing his subordinates' exercises. He sees that he has them highly motivated and can handle a large number of subordinates effectively. Gnome approaches him and asks what he wants. Uchimura explains that he wanted to introduce himself formally and ask if he has any useful information about the ogres. Gnome informs her that Ogur, the chief, is a complicated individual due to his boldness and bravery. His rivals see him as a dictator, is all the information she can provide. She then asks Uchimura to get that thing out of her sight, as her subordinates get upset when there are demons around. Uchimura doesn't understand until he notices Ulmandra standing behind him. Ulmandra is visibly angered by Gnome's comments and tells Uchimura that she came to find him because he was taking too long, and she began to worry about him. Gnome again asks Uchimura to leave with that thing as soon as possible. Ulmandra, furious at being called a thing, barely contains herself. Uchimura now understands that the two have a strained relationship. At night, Uchimura and Ulmandra arrive at the Ogre tribe, where the guards make them wait for the chief's permission to enter. Ulmandra is annoyed by this, but Uchimura knows that such negotiations begin even before reaching the table. He tells Ulmandra that making the other party wait is common in negotiations and advises her to stay calm, but she only grows more irritated. At that moment, a pretty ogre girl arrives to escort them inside. As they enter the castle, Uchimura notices how grand and imposing the place is. Ulmandra warns him not to let his guard down, as ogres are very dangerous. But Uchimura is only concerned about the tribe's chief, whom Gnome described as a formidable rival. They finally reach the hall where Ogure awaits. Ulmandra attempts to present their interests, but Ogure silences her and suggests she shouldn't speak without permission. Furious, Ulmandra holds back to avoid ruining the situation. Ogure assumes the demon army has come to surrender and says he'll accept, but only if they eliminate the Dark Lord. Ulmandra is fuming, but Uchimura manages to hold her back. Uchimura replies to Ogure that they'll consider it, and thanks him for making time to meet with them. He takes Ulmandra and leaves. Outside the castle, Ulmandra explodes in anger. Uchimura asks her to calm down, and explains that Ogure was trying to provoke them into breaking off negotiations. Ogure has no intention of negotiating but wants to avoid unnecessary conflict. That's why he insulted them, so that if the deal falls through, it would be their fault, not his. Ulmandra understands and asks if Uchimura wasn't offended by the insult to their leader. Uchimura admits he was, but reacting would only harm the Dark Lord. If they broke off the talks, the ogres could ally with someone else and attack the demon army. If no agreement can be reached, it's better to withdraw for now. Ulmandra understands and apologizes for her reaction, asking what they will do next. At that moment, the ogre who let them in appears, introducing herself as Olulu, Ogure's daughter. Ulmandra suspects she is about to attack, but Uchimura calms her down and asks Olulu what she wants. She replies that she wants her father to step down from the throne. Olulu leads them to an abandoned warehouse that turns out to be the castle's storage room. Apparently, the tribe has been facing economic hardships, struggling even to feed themselves. This aligns with Uchimura's suspicions, as he noticed the guards' worn armor and the dimly lit, imposing castle, typical signs of a declining enterprise. Olulu believes the tribe can only be saved by forging a pact with the demon army, but Ogure is stubborn and burdened by illness. That's why they had to wait so long to see him. He struggles just to stand. Olulu knows that if her father were to pass away at the wrong time, it would spell the end of the tribe. Uchimura understands her concerns, but warns her that exposing such sensitive information is reckless. Olulu notices Uchimura's kind demeanor and assumes he must be soft-hearted, a sentiment Ulmandra agrees with. Olulu admits she shared this private information because she sees Uchimura as a good person and proposes marriage, suggesting he become the new leader of the ogres. Uchimura is shocked and Ulmandra grows furious upon hearing this. Olulu insists that he is the tribe's best hope, as the other ogres are too influenced by Ogre's stubbornness. As Olulu pressures him to marry immediately, Ulmandra, attempting to conceal her fury, intervenes and asks for time to consider the proposal. Later, Uchimura returns to his office and reflects deeply on the situation, pondering the best course of action. Once again, he finds himself in the imaginary bar of his mind, sipping a drink. He overhears Ulmandra shouting at the bartender, insisting the lion is the best beast king, to which the bartender simply shakes his head. Ulmandra then asks Uchimura's opinion. Who is stronger, the lion or the gorilla? Uchimura is unsure how to answer. The waiter mentions the intimidating drumming of the gorilla, while Ulmandra counters with the scratching of the lion. The waiter dismisses this, pointing out that cats scratch too, which leads Ulmandra to argue that lions hunt in packs. As Uchimura contemplates these points while finishing his drink, he seems to find inspiration. Adjusting his tie, he prepares to close the deal. The next day, Ulmandra finds him preparing a carriage for departure. But instead of heading to see the ogres, he has a different destination in mind. Confused, Ulmandra asks where they are going. Uchimura tells her he'll explain on the way, adding that if everything goes according to plan, the ogre leader himself will initiate the negotiation. A week later, Ogure summons them, furious, demanding to know why the neighboring tribes are joining the demon army. Uchimura smiles, seeing that his plan is working. During the carriage ride a week earlier, he had explained to Ulmandra his intention to recruit the other tribes first, suspecting they were also struggling financially since they hadn't offered any aid to the ogres. By annexing the mid-tier tribes associated with the ogres, Uchimura referred to this strategy as the corporate takeover of major companies. It's a method he had used successfully before. If you approach a major company directly, you'll get kicked out. But if you secure deals with mid-sized companies first, the major one will have no choice but to listen. With the first step complete, they now have Ogure's attention. Uchimura explains to the leader that these tribes were struggling to survive, and joining the demon army ensured their survival. Ogure, increasingly irritated, claims those tribes were under ogre territory and refuses to tolerate it. Uchimura smiles again, recognizing that Ogure is now emotional and therefore less logical. In negotiations, the first to lose their temper loses the upper hand. Uchimura apologizes but insists the fusion was fair and included a deal with the ogre tribe. Ogure counters that no deal was made with him. Ulmandra interjects, saying they didn't need to make a deal with him. At that moment, Olulu enters the room, revealing she was responsible for organizing negotiations with the neighboring tribes, as she holds the authority to do so. Olulu explains to her father that their priority must be the lives of their people, and the best option is to ally with the demon army. Ogure attempts to argue, but Olulu cuts him off, telling him that, painful as it may be to admit, the great, invincible Ogure is now a sick, old man. Uchimura proposes an alliance with the demon army as equals. He knows that under the Dark Lord's empire, there's no real distinction between being annexed and being an ally, since autonomy is allowed. However, To someone as proud as Ogure, being an ally versus a subordinate is a significant difference. Ogure agrees to consider the proposal and promises to give them an answer later. Uchimura leaves, confident that the negotiations went perfectly. A few days later, Ulmandra goes to look for Uchimura, as Ogure is summoning them to reach an agreement, but finds him surrounded by large piles of papers. Ulmandra suggests picking someone at random, but Uchimura dismisses the idea. He wishes he could choose Ulmandra as his assistant, which excites her, though she doesn't realize it's only because she's the only person in this world he knows. Suddenly, Ululu arrives, sent to finalize the agreement. She announces that Ogure is delegating responsibilities, and a new leader will soon take the throne. As a token of gratitude, Ululu offers Uchimura a reward of his choosing. Without hesitation, he requests for her to become his assistant. Ululu eagerly embraces the offer, much to Ulmandra's dismay as her bubble of hope shatters. Hey, if you made it to this part of the video, don't forget to write the word Exquisito in the comment section. Thank you so much and see you in the next video.